I have cataloged 41,200,000 pieces of drift in this corridor alone. Hull plate, Reaktorschlag, frozen bodies sealed in suits that failed before the suit's makers understood what failure meant. The tessellate assembly does not waste a system once it has been cleared. We process, we file, we move the front forward by exactly the distance the dead leave behind, and I have done this work across 1,100 systems without a single entry that did not fit a known shape. I was built for this, not for combat, not for diplomacy, not for the grand calculus that decides which species get the generation to surrender and which gets none. I am a calculer, a cataloging mind, one of 9,000 running this corridor alone, and my function is small and complete. Find the drift, measure it, name it, file it. The assembly trusts the work to minds like mine because we do not get bored, we do not get careless, and we have never once in any system, in any century of the campaign, filed something wrong. This is why I noticed the object at all. It did not fit. It drifted at 0.4 kilometers a second on a heading that matched nothing. Not the system's old orbital paths, not the debris cone from the last engagement, not even the slow tumble physics gives to dead things left spinning. It was small. 4 meters by 4 meters by 4 meters, a near-perfect cube, dark gray, cold to every sensor my drones carried. No drive signature, no power bleed, no heat above ambient. By every reading my arrays returned, it was the most unremarkable object in a corridor of 41 million unremarkable objects, and I almost filed it as exactly that before some small weighting in my own architecture. Call it instinct if a calculators permitted the word. Asked for one more pass. I logged it as drift class, unknown origin, and dispatched a tow drone to bring it in for disassembly. This is the correct procedure. I have performed this procedure 180,000 times. I expected the 180,001st to be identical to the rest. I queued the next 40 objects in the field behind it and did not, in that moment, think of the cube again. The tow drone's grapple closed on the cube at 400 meters out. Its diagnostic ping, a standard density and structural integrity sweep, nothing aggressive, nothing the cube should have been able to register as anything at all, returned a number that did not belong to any material in the assembly's index. The mass was wrong, not heavier than it looked. Wrong in a way that meant the cube was not solid and was also not hollow, and the difference between those two readings was the only warning I received before the seams opened. I want to be precise about what I saw, because precision is the only inheritance I can leave to whichever branch of the assembly reads this account, and because nothing in my training prepared me to describe it any other way. The cube did not detonate. It unfolded. Each face split along a line too fine for my drone's optics to have resolved a moment earlier, and behind each face was another face, smaller, folded again, and behind that another, the geometry repeating downward through a recursion that had no right to exist inside for cubic meters of anything. I watched 11,000 individual hulls. I counted them as they emerged because counting is what I am, and I did not stop counting even as the number told me everything I needed to know, peel out a box that should have held perhaps 11. They did not power up gradually. They were already warm. They had been warm the entire time, sealed behind a skin engineered to read as cold to anything that came close enough to ask, patient in a way nothing in the assembly's bestiary of enemies had ever needed to be patient, because patience implies waiting for something, and as far as my arrays could tell, this object had not been waiting. It had simply been there, indistinguishable from 41 million other dead things, for as long as I've been counting. I broadcast the contact alert at the same moment the first of the 11,000 reached firing range of my tow drone, which means the alert and the drone's destruction arrived in the assembly's command lattice inside the same packet. I did not think anyone read the warning before the consequence. I am not certain there was time for the two to be separate events, and I have run the timing 40 times since to be sure of that, because being sure of small, true things is the only comfort left to a mind built only to catalog. My processing fleet held position 8,000 kilometers out, exactly where doctrine says a fleet should sit while a single drone tows in a piece of unremarkable drift. 8,000 kilometers is a comfortable margin against anything we had ever classified as a threat in this corridor. It was not a comfortable margin against this. The Assembly's flagship in that sector, the Tessellate Reckoner, carried 340 escort hulls and had stood at the edge of 9 cleared systems without losing a single one of them. I had filed every engagement the Reckoner had ever fought. I knew its tonnage, its weapon cycle time, its crew complement down to the individual mind aboard it. None of that data was wrong. None of it mattered. The 11,000 did not engage the Reckoner the way a fleet engages a fleet, advancing and trading fire and falling back to reload. They arrived the way a weather front arrives, simultaneous, total, indifferent to the order in which targets were chosen, because no order had been chosen. Every hull the Reckoner carried received fire inside the same 11 seconds, and the Reckoner's own point defense grid, built to answer 100 incoming threats at once, simply ran out of attention before it ran out of targets. From first unfold to the last status ping, going dark across the entire corridor, 9 minutes. I have that number from my own internal clock, which never stopped, because nothing in my design had ever given the 11,000 a reason to spend a single shot on me. I was, by every measure that mattered to them, debris. The category error ran in both directions that day, and only one of us survived it. I have tried to find the correct entry for this in the Assembly's index, and there is not one. We have a classification for ambush. We have a classification for superior numbers, for superior technology, for treachery, for sabotage. We do not have a classification for a single sealed object that is simultaneously and without contradiction one thing and 11,000 things, dormant and already in motion, debris and the deadliest weapon I have ever watched operate. I have submitted a request that the Assembly create one. I do not expect the request to be approved before the next cube is found, because there will be a next cube. I watched the 11,000 finish their work, watch them reconverge on the original 4-meter shape, watch the same impossible recursion run backward, face folding in a face, hull tucking in a hull, 11,000 engines going cold and quiet and convincingly, perfectly dead, until the box drifted again at 0.4 kilometers a second on a heading that matched nothing, exactly as it had before, exactly as if none of it had happened. Exactly as if I had imagined 9 minutes that. Every other instrument in the corridor agrees we're real. Is still out there. I am still watching it, because watching is the only function the Assembly left to me once the rest of the corridor stopped answering and command authority defaulted, by procedure, to the lowest priority mind still transmitting. I have not reported its new heading to anyone above me in the lattice. I'm not certain who is left to report it to, and I have begun to suspect that the silence above me is its own kind of answer. I do not know what the makers of that box call themselves. I know only what the 11,000 transmitted to one another in the 9 minutes they were awake, a single identifier repeated on every hull, on every burst of targeting data, on every quiet confirmation of a kill, a designation the Assembly's translators render, as close as our language allows, as the Harrow. I do not know how many more of them are drifting through corridors we have already marked clean, filed, finished. I know only that I will go on cataloging every piece of drift in this sector for as long as I am permitted to run, and that I will never again close a grapple on something cold and small and unremarkable without first asking, in the quiet space where a calculator keeps its instinct, whether I am counting debris or simply waiting my turn.